A breakthrough for scientists after they had a 20-minute conversation with a humpback whale.
Somewhere off the coast of Alaska, in December of 2023, a research boat idles in freezing water while a speaker under the hull plays a single recorded sound into the deep. Nobody on board expects anything to happen. Then a 40-ton humpback whale surfaces beside the boat, circles it twice, and answers. Not once, 36 times in 20 minutes. What most people online will tell you next is wrong. They'll tell you scientists finally cracked the whale language and started chatting with sperm whales using artificial intelligence. That is not what happened, and the real story is stranger, slower, and in some ways more remarkable than the viral version, because it involves two separate scientific efforts, two different whale species, and a twist that even most science journalists have gotten tangled up in. To understand how we got here, you have to go back to a much quieter moment in ocean history. For most of human existence, whales were simply enormous shapes beneath the waves, hunted for oil and bone, admired for their size, but never really considered as minds. That changed in the 1970s, when a biologist named Roger Payne released recordings of humpback whales producing long, structured, almost musical sequences of sound. Those recordings, released to the public, became one of the most influential pieces of bioacoustic research in history. They didn't just fascinate scientists, they helped spark the entire modern whale conservation movement and contributed to protections that pulled several whale populations back from the edge of extinction. For decades afterward, researchers kept listening. They built up an enormous catalog of clicks, moans, and songs. But listening was never the hard part. Understanding what any of it meant was a problem nobody could solve, because the human ear and the human brain simply aren't built to detect patterns buried in thousands of hours of underwater noise. That bottleneck is where marine biologist named David Gruber enters the story. Gruber, a National Geographic explorer and professor at the City University of New York, had spent years working on unrelated ocean science, including research into biofluorescent sea creatures. In 2017 and 2018, while at Harvard's Radcliffe Institute as a fellow, he found himself sharing space with researchers from completely different fields, among them a cryptographer and a machine learning expert who were working on how translation systems learn to move between human languages without needing a dictionary. Gruber started wondering whether those same mathematical tools, the ones used to map the hidden structure of English or Mandarin, could be pointed at something nobody had ever tried them on, the clicks of a sperm whale. He also found himself drawn to an unlikely comparison. For decades, an organization called SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, had been scanning the sky for signal from other civilizations. Gruber's idea was almost a mirror image of that search. What if humanity didn't need to look to the stars to find an alien-level intelligence to try to understand? What if there was already one living in our oceans, communicating in patterns which simply never had the tools to decode? Out of that idea came Project SETI, the Cetacean Translation Initiative, a name deliberately built to echo SETI. Project SETI didn't stay a one-person idea for long. Gruber pulled together an unusually wide team, marine biologists who had spent their careers in small boats following individual whale families, roboticists who build gentle machines that can approach a wild animal without harming it, computer scientists working at the edge of machine learning, and linguists trained to look for structure in a language even when there's no dictionary to translate it. One of the most important people on that team is Shane Jarrow, a scientist who had already spent well over a decade before SETI even existed getting to know a single extended family of sperm whales living near the Caribbean island of Dominica. Jarrow didn't just record these whales. He learned to recognize individuals, watch calves grow up, and track relationships across whale generations. That kind of patient, decades-long fieldwork became the foundation the entire project would eventually be built on, because you cannot train an AI system to notice what's unusual in whale communication if you don't already have a deep, ground-truth understanding of what's normal. In 2020, the project received a major boost when it was selected as a TED Audacious project, receiving roughly $33 million in catalytic funding to get off the ground. That funding didn't go toward a single microphone or a single boat trip. It went toward building something that had never existed before, a 20-kilometer by 20-kilometer underwater listening network off the coast of Dominica, made up of arrays of hydrophones, essentially specialized underwater microphones, anchored to the sea floor and left running continuously. This network could not only capture the sound of a whale coda, it could also help pinpoint which direction a sound came from and, combined with tagging data, which specific whale in a family group had made it. To get even closer, the team also deployed autonomous underwater drones and small robotic systems designed to place gentle, non-invasive suction cup tags on the whales themselves. These tags recorded not just sound but movement, depth, heart rate, and social behavior, giving researchers crucial context for every click they picked up. Was the whale hunting, socializing, resting near the surface? That context turned out to be essential, because sound without context is just noise, and noise was exactly the problem researchers had been stuck with for 50 years. Over time, this setup allowed the team to gather a genuinely unprecedented amount of data, recordings that stretch back years and span thousands of individual clicks and coders, far beyond anything earlier researchers working with handheld recorders could ever have hoped to collect. And this is where the machine learning side of the project actually started to earn its keep. Sperm whales don't sing long, flowing songs the way humpbacks do. Instead, they communicate in short, rapid bursts of clicks called coders, usually somewhere between 3 and 40 clicks fired off in quick succession. To a human listening in real time, most coders sound nearly identical, a rattling burst that's gone in under a second. To find any structure in that, researchers first had to convert the raw audio into spectrograms, visual representations of sound that a machine learning model can actually analyze the way it would analyze an image. Once the sound became something closer to a picture, deep learning system could be trained to spot patterns invisible to the human eye, tiny variations in timing, rhythm, and the spacing between individual clicks that repeat across thousands of recordings in ways that are too subtle and too fast for us to consciously track. In the spring of 2024, that work led to a real, peer-reviewed, and genuinely significant discovery. Researchers from Project SETI, working with MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, published a study in the journal Nature Communications describing what they called a sperm whale phonetic alphabet. Rather than being random or arbitrary, sperm whale coders turned out to be built from a small set of combinable features. Two of these features, described using musical terms, are rhythm and tempo, essentially the pattern and speed of the clicks within a coda. Layered on top of those are two more flexible elements borrowed from music theory: rubato, meaning small expressive changes in timing, and ornamentation, meaning extra clicks tacked onto the beginning or end of a sequence. The discovery that mattered here wasn't just that whales click in patterns. Researchers already knew that. It was that these small building blocks can be combined and recombined depending on the social context of the conversation, producing something with real combinatorial structure, a system where changing one small element changes a whole unit of meaning, similar in principle to how swapping a single sound changes an entire word in a human language. It's the closest thing to a genuine alphabet that has ever been documented in a non-human species. The story didn't stop there either. In further research building on that same body of data, the team identified something that functions similarly to vowels within these coders. When you strip away the natural pauses whales leave between clicks and look closely at the frequency patterns, two distinct, repeatable sound qualities show up again and again across different whales. Patterns researchers have nicknamed the A coda and the I coda, a rough echo of how human vowel sounds work. This doesn't mean whales are speaking English with an accent, or that scientists have found a sperm whale word for hello. What it means is that sperm whale communication has structural depth, real subcomponents that can be modulated and combined in ways researchers had never confirmed in any whale species before, and arguably in very few animal communication systems of any kind. Now here's where the myth creeps in, and where your titled promise actually pays off, because what everybody remembers is a whale answering back, and that part is also true, just not from this project. In December of 2023, a completely separate research team, made up of scientists from the SETI Institute, the University of California, Davis, and the Alaska Whale Foundation, was working with humpback whales off the coast of Alaska, studying their social calls as part of a program with its own SETI-inspired name, Whale SETI. Using an underwater speaker, they played a recorded humpback contact call, a common social greeting sound. A humpback whale the researchers had come to know, named Twain, approached the boat and responded, not with a random noise but by matching the timing pattern of the call, again and again, for roughly 20 minutes, answering 36 times the 38 playback calls. The lead researchers on that study described it as a first such intentional exchange between humans and humpback whales using the whale's own communicative signals. It was published in the journal Piaget, and the team was explicit that its ultimate goal wasn't just about whales at all. Like Gruber's SETI-inspired project, this team was partly motivated by the idea that learning how to detect and respond to an unfamiliar intelligent signal here on Earth might one day help us recognize a genuine signal from beyond it. So the honest picture looks like this. One team, Project SETI, has spent years building the most detailed acoustic map of sperm-whale communication that has ever existed, and has genuinely discovered that these clicks carry a structured, combinable, almost alphabet-like system, along with something resembling vowel sounds. Nobody on that team has yet held a two-way conversation with a sperm whale, and the researchers themselves are careful to say they still don't know what any specific coda actually means in the way a word means something. A separate team, working with humpback whales in Alaska and inspired by the same instinct to treat animal communication as a rehearsal for encountering unfamiliar intelligence, achieved a real, recorded back-and-forth exchange, but with a different species, a different ocean, and no AI language decoding involved at all, just a recorded greeting call and a patient, careful playback. Two remarkable stories, frequently squeezed into one after they get retold online enough times. What comes next for Project SETI is not, despite what some headlines imply, an imminent underwater chatbot. The team has been clear that its no-term goal is refining the machine learning models further, expanding the dataset, and eventually working toward the very early, cautious stages of playback experiments with sperm whales themselves, informed by everything the alphabet and vowel research has revealed. That is a much slower and more careful process than translating whale, and the scientists involved have been open about the ethical weight of even attempting it. Introducing human-generated sounds into a wild whale family's communication isn't something to be done carelessly. There's a real possibility that clumsy human interference could confuse or disrupt animals that have spent thousands of generations developing dialects and social bonds long before we ever thought to listen. Every serious researcher working on this, from Gruber's team to the SETI-inspired humpback researchers in Alaska, has said some version of the same thing. This is to happen on the whale's terms, slowly and with restraint, not as a race to get the first viral clip of talking to an animal. Where does that leave the rest of us? It leaves us with something arguably more interesting than a cheap headline. For the first time, there's solid, peer-reviewed evidence that a non-human species is using a communication system with genuine internal structure, small modifiable building blocks that combine to create different messages depending on social context, layered with something functionally similar to vowels. That's not proof of a whale language identical to ours, but it firmly puts to rest the old assumption that complex, structured communication is something only humans are capable of. It also strengthens something that started with Roger Payne's original whale song recordings back in the 1970s. The more clearly we understand how intricate an animal's inner and social life actually is, the harder it becomes to see them only as a resource, and the easier it becomes to fight for their survival. Every hydrophone array, every tag coda, every newly identified vowel adds one more reason to protect these animals and the ocean they depend on. And there's the wider implication, too, the one both of these projects were quietly built around from the start. If we ever do detect a genuine, unfamiliar intelligent signal, whether from the deep ocean or somewhere much farther away, we are going to need exactly the kind of tools these teams have spent years developing: patient, long-term observation, enormous datasets, machine learning models trained to find structure where human senses find only noise, and above all the humility to listen for a very long time before assuming we understand what we're hearing. The story of Project SETI and the story of Twain the humpback whale answering a boat off the coast of Alaska aren't the same story, but they are, in their own separate and careful ways, both early chapters in the same much larger question. Are we really as alone in this conversation as we've always assumed? So what do you think? Does the fact that these are two different breakthroughs, not one single AI-powered whale conversation, make this story more impressive to you or less? Let me know in the comments below, and if you want more deep dives like this one, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next upload.